You're listening to the Drummer Daily Podcast, the only daily podcast dedicated just to drummers. Go to my website at danielhadaway.com. Well, hello again. Welcome back. I hope you're ready to jump into some drum stuff. I know I am. If you missed yesterday's episode, you don't have to listen to it first. But yesterday we talked about how I go about deciding when it's time to change drum heads. So if that interests you at all, jump back and listen to that one. Otherwise, today we're going to talk about how I go about picking out drum heads. I'm hopefully this won't be too simple for some of you. I know it might be. So feel free to just skip this episode if you already know how you like to pick out drum heads, or you don't have any interest in how I do it. Feel free to skip this. It won't hurt my feelings. But I'm just going to tell you a couple of things that I do when I decide what drum heads I'm going to pick out. Now, I will say I don't have an endorsement for drum head companies or anything like that. So I have played. I think I've played every major company. So I've played Remo, I've played Evans. I used to love Aquarian heads. I played those for a while, and I've even played some Attack drum heads. I don't know if they make those anymore. I don't see those around much. I might disappoint you in my knowledge of gear. Just warning you, I'm not much of a gear guy. I don't stay up to date necessarily on all the newest trends and gear. But I have tried a bunch of drum heads. And so I do want to just tell you that I don't have a preference necessarily from one company to another. I oftentimes refer to drum heads in terms of Remo heads only because they've been around so long and their basic heads have not changed as far as what they are and kind of how they're made. And so I feel like that's a good baseline to operate off of. But the good thing is that all the other makers, they have equivalent drum heads. And I'm sure there's some great tools online for comparing. Like if you like this drum head by Remo, you'll like this drum head by Evans or whatever it is. So I will say I do like Aquarian heads. I just don't have them available to me very often. And I don't have the patience now to experiment. So I just stick with Remo heads most of the time now. But I do have my practice kit. So I have two kits. I have an ANF kit, which I've talked about probably too much. You guys might be annoyed by it, but I love it so much. I have an ANF kit, and that kit has all Remo heads on it. And so it's got ambassadors, coated ambassadors on the top, and I believe, I don't have them in front of me right now. They're on a box truck on the way back from Arizona right now, or on the way back from Seattle. But I believe they're clear ambassadors on the bottom, and the snare has a coated ambassador on top, and then I believe a diplomat snare side on the bottom. So those are all single ply heads. So like if you were doing Evans heads, that would be like a G1, would be a similar type head. So that just gave you a disclaimer on that. And then I do have Evans heads on my practice kit. I have a Tama kit that I just practice on at home sometimes. And that's one I've had since I was 16. And that one's got Evans heads. So I think I've got G2, coated G2s on those. And then I've got an HD, is it Genera, how you say it? Genera HD dry head on the snare that came with it. So it's got the little holes punched around it. I love that because it doesn't need much muffling. It's pretty dry. But all that to say, the way that I pick heads is this. So the first kind of step that I look for in a drum head, I basically think about it this way. I approach picking out drum heads with what are the things, the characteristics of a drum head that I can't change after I have the head on the drum. So I start at the thing that's the hardest to change, and I work my way up to things that can be changed pretty easy. So the first thing I look at is how sensitive the drum head is. I actually prefer a drum head that's fairly sensitive. So the way I would describe sensitivity is this. How hard do you have to hit the drum in order to make it speak at its full volume or the full characteristic of the drum? So, if you were to barely touch a drum with a drumstick, it's kind of like a ghost note sound. You hear a lot more of the snares than you hear like the actual attack of the drum head. And then as you slowly were to hit the drum harder and harder, there'll be a point at which you start really hearing the full tone of the drum. And how sensitive a drum is, or drum head is, will determine how hard I need to hit it to get to that full voicing of the drum before it starts making the full sound. So I like to not have to hit too hard. I don't want a lot of volume, but I want it to sound, I want the drum to speak at its full volume. That's just the nature of the kind of music that I play a lot with other people. And also I play at church a lot, or play in a lot of like worship music settings. And so we play in some smaller rooms. And so when we do that, I don't, and also for the sake of our sound guy, and also we like to set up pretty small on stage, I don't want a lot of bleed from, like when I hit the drum, I don't want my drums bleeding over into the vocalist mic. And we really don't like using those drum shields. So I like a drum that can speak fully without me hitting it too hard. So the sensitivity of a head is actually the most important thing to me. And so that's why I play like Ambassadors, a single ply head, mostly, is because those are super sensitive. I can play pretty quietly and still get that full sound that I want from them. Now, obviously, if you hit harder, or playing different kinds of bands, you're going to want something that is not only maybe less sensitive, but also more durable. And those kind of go hand in hand a lot of times, because normally sensitive heads are going to be thinner by default. And then as you go up in durability, you go down in sensitivity. So I like sensitive heads, and so I pick single ply heads. The next thing above that is the tone of the head. So how much ring is it going to give me? How dry of a sound do I want? And the thing about that is, the reason why that's not as important as sensitivity to me is that there are all kinds of great muffling options out there. Like I use a snare weight. I use a snare weight M80, which is, if you look that up, it's kind of like a little leather thing that kind of lays across the drum head, and you kind of adjust how much muffling you get. So I use those sometimes, but I know that I can adjust the amount of ring and response I get out of a head after the fact. So that's less important. But if you've heard me talk about tuning drums before, you'll know that I do prefer to try to tune a drum to get as close to the sound, the end result sound that I want as possible, just via tuning. And that also a lot of that comes from the kind of head I use. So once I find the sensitivity I want in a head, I then look for what can get me tonally, the amount of tone, the amount of ring I want, what can get me as close as I can get to what I want in that respect. And so depending on like the types of settings I've been in, I've actually experimented with, there's a Remo makes this thing called a Vintage A, which is like a vintage Ambassador. And what's interesting about that head is that it's actually a two-ply head. So people think about Ambassadors normally being a single-ply head. Well, the Vintage A is actually a two-ply head. And I found that that's actually a pretty cool balance of sensitivity and kind of that vintage, a little deader, less, not quite so ringy of a sound. So that's been a kind of a fun thing I've played with. And I'm not sure if Evans has something like that, or Aquarian. They probably do, I just don't know about it. So anyway, that, and then beyond those two characteristics I look for in a drum, the last thing I look for is, it's not, I guess ring was what I was talking about before, now I'm talking about tone. So kind of like the actual, like, does the drum sing, or does it kind of like rise and fall like a wave of lava? I would say a wave, like a wave of water, but it's a little thicker of a sound. How long does the head naturally speak and fall off? How long does it want to ring? Can I control it with tuning, or does it just sound flabby and dead if I try to control that tone with tuning? And then of course, some people have brand preferences. So beyond that, like what brand do you like, or what do you know, or what do you trust? I know some people knock Remo heads because they use glue still in the collars of their heads, and so they crack a lot, but it doesn't really bother me. It used to bother me a lot more. That's why I used to love Aquarian heads, because I guess maybe I got pulled into the marketing. I don't know if it's marketing or not, but like they always had these ads in magazines that were like, can you do the tap test? And it was, they're saying your drum head should have a tone even when it's not on a drum. So they would tell you, like in the store, to like pull out a drum head and like tap on it. And Aquarian heads, sure enough, you tap on an Aquarian drum head when it's not even on a drum, you hold it by the hoop, and it has a tone. So if you want lots of tone, I guess that's what you go for. And I don't know how much of that's marketing, like if it really makes a difference when you tune a drum up, but I actually liked it for a while. Oh, and that brings me to something else, because Aquarian has these heads called Super Kick heads, and a lot of guys love those heads. And I actually used to love them too, because I used to play in clubs where the kick drum might be the only thing that was mic'd, or maybe there were no mics at all. There might be like one overhead mic on all the drums and no kick drum mic. And the cool thing about the Super Kick heads was that they would give you this amazing like cannon-like sound from your kick drum, even if it wasn't mic'd up, in this big low end sound. If you tuned it up tight enough, it would really just knock your hair back as far as the sound goes. But what I learned is that actually I don't prefer that sound for any other situation when it's mic'd up. It actually sounds a little rough. It's a little tough to control for a sound guy. I actually really enjoy sounds that are a little deader now and a little bit more attacky, I guess would be the right word. A little more click, a little more bite when you hit the kick drum. So that's why I actually use, I like the Power Stroke heads from Remo now. They have a little more tone than I actually like there's like a clear Power Stroke, like pinstripe looking kind of head. That I really like a lot, especially like the vintage style drums. I had a Rogers kit for a while that I loved that on, and then now I've got this A&F kit. It's also very much a vintage style sound that I go for with that kit, and so I love pinstripe or like a clear Power Stroke 3 kind of head on that drum. So that kind of gives you an overview. So I'm sorry I ran on for so long about all this. Hopefully there's something useful for you in this. I hope you enjoy listening to this podcast. And we'll be back next week. I think I'm going to keep on covering some questions I've had come in about different topics that you'd like to hear about. So hopefully you'll enjoy those too. Until then, though, have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.